Welcome to Conversations on Resilient Leadership. I'm Jim Vries, founder of Enhance International Group, and your host for today's episode. This podcast series is where we dive deep into the minds of leaders who have not only navigated through uncertainty, but have emerged stronger, more innovative, and more resilient. Whether you're a seasoned executive or an emerging leader, each episode offers you unique access to the strategies and insights of top leaders who are redefining leadership in today's dynamic environment. Today, we have the privilege of sitting down with a remarkable leader, Mike Amato, author, executive coach, keynote speaker of Amato Sparks from the great state of Washington. I was introduced to Mike through Dr. Mark Sneringer, an EIG executive partner. Right away, I've been struck by his story and his leadership principles he's developed through one of the most challenging times of his life. He's a great example of turning adversity into opportunity. Mike is a business coach who helps owners and leaders grow their businesses and careers by fostering a growth mindset. His journey is remarkable. Starting in 1982 as an entry-level employee at Washington Mutual, over 24 years and through 32 acquisitions, he rose to become president of the retail bank, overseeing 2,200 branches. What an accomplishment. In 2006, sensing a shift in the bank's culture, Mike moved to London. Got to hop the pond, right? To lead Barclays' UK branch network, managing over 30,000 employees. He successfully navigated a major scandal there, leading to the largest turnaround in UK banking history. His success expanded his leadership across Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. After his executive career, Mike served on the boards of Santander UK and Tandem Bank, a digital startup. He also co-founded Ambassador Wines, named one of the top 100 wineries in the world, not only once, but twice. So please join me in welcoming Mike Amato. Mike, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. That was a lengthy introduction, Jim. Thanks so much.
Well, it's probably only a fraction of all the accomplishments that you have made over your lifetime, and we'll learn more about those as we go through here, but it's quite interesting to see all the things that you've been able to accomplish, and I think that our listeners will be very intrigued by how you've been able to turn things around in many different situations and how you're always looking ahead. So a few words to share with us before we get started here.
No, it's just been great to connect with you. I'm excited for the podcast today because as the questions will reveal, we're certainly in a time. You think about ever since I've started my executive career, 35, 40 years ago now, it's always the year ends with, and never before in these troubled times have we faced these leadership challenges, certainly once in a generation, and navigating that will be extremely tricky. But the things we'll talk about today are the fundamentals of leadership, which will carry them through, in my firm belief.
Yeah, there's great expectations out there, right? With that, what does leadership mean to you, Mike?
To me, you're not a leader if nobody follows you. I've had great leaders that I've worked for and some leaders that were not so great. And the not so great ones I had one that actually my boss pointed to his shoulder and said, "I'm the boss because I got more stripes than you." And to me, that was not great leadership, obviously. So a great leader is followed. Everybody communicates, and a great leader, though, connects. So if you say management's a science, to me, leadership is a feeling. And that's what I think is key when you think about what creates a great leader. They're felt.
So what do you see the difference between management and leadership?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think management's a process. It's about science. Management's important to have the fundamentals down to become a good leader. A lot of business owners, CEOs, may be great leaders. I mean, they attract people to them, and they're seen as inspirational, but they don't do the blocking, the tackling, the X's and the O's, if you will, and so the management skills can sometimes be lacking. So the management to me is about management processes that encompass all the things that a manager needs to oversee in a business and their people. A leadership, as I said before, is more of a feeling. So leadership is not just because you got promoted, are you the boss, as I just said. But what I mean is that the leader attracts followers and they're willing to lead or follow. But if somebody doesn't want to lead or follow, they need to get out of the way. And that's an old saying, but I really like it. So to me, leadership is creating that feeling and that connection to purpose. It's a connection of purpose that the leadership represents that actually frees them up to manage the organization in a much better and much more sound way.
Excellent. Excellent. Do you have any stories of leaders that have influenced you or in your leadership style and what made you Mike?
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. My first boss, I was a financial advisor, and my first boss was a fantastic manager. I mean, he knew the business in and out, and he not only helped train me, but he followed up with me every quarter. He knew the power of stretch goals and how to talk to me about them, so that in the 7 or 8 quarters that I worked for him, I never once went below the stretch goal. So we had a minimum to keep your job, target, and then stretch. And he knew just how to meet with me every single quarter. And we built on every conversation from the last, but knew that if he could pull out a very big stretch goal, and if I owned it, then I would achieve it. Now, I think he had different tactics with different other financial advisors, but for me, that just worked great. Now, my next boss was a visionary, and he created vision looking down the road saying, here's what's going to change, here's what's going to happen. We need to navigate today to get to there. And it was so inspiring to me because I like the bigger picture. I like the connection to a bigger to bigger accomplishments and greater accomplishments, not just in that quarter goal, but the next 2 or 3 years can define how markets change, how the company is going to reorganize, and your role in it. So I felt like I was part of this incredible journey that we were going to go on. So I learned about inspiration from that leader. A third leader was one that said, if once you've proven yourself, then you've earned the license to have a lot of freedom in how you express yourself. What I mean by that is that if you produce outcomes and deliver what you're supposed to deliver, then you're allowed with this leader to be really empowered to let your personality come to the fore. And for me, I look at myself as somewhat different than the average executive. I have a different way of seeing the world, as I hope it'll come across today. And the ability to have the confidence to express myself the way I wanted to produced what I think were stellar results that I would have been muted or far less effective if I had to fit in the box of what her leadership style was all about. If she dictated that to me, she'd let me have my own personality. So those are 3 examples that kind of built on each other, actually sequentially, and then also capability wise.
Sounds like a very fortunate type of environment to grow in, to have
Super
leaders
fortunate.
like that to help
Super
mentor you and help you grow. That's really so that just begs me to ask the question is, was that a unique time in your life where the leadership in that first few years that you had, were you ever able to see that again? Or was that unique at that particular time of your career?
Interesting enough, the way my career played out, those 3 examples span my entire career. So I knew all 3 people on day one, and I knew all 3 on day last. So they were there the entire time. Although the first 2 retired and dropped off and I moved on. But the point being that it wasn't. I never had to go and work in a different environment for different people and figure out what they're looking for, etc. I had a massively beneficial continuity of that leadership style, and it allowed me to again grow on a foundation that allowed me to continue my growth and my capabilities. As I mentioned just a second ago, my capabilities expanded exponentially because I had confidence that I knew what the game was. I knew what we were trying to accomplish, and I knew that we were going to achieve aspirational things. And to me, that's super exciting.
So what was a turning point throughout that time when you said, okay, I want to really be a leader. I really I want to go from doing managing a little bit of leadership and to more leadership to, running the whole enchilada, so to speak. What were some of the key turning points for you in making that decision?
Yes, great question. Because the first one was, as a financial advisor, I knew for the first time ever, I'd found a job that I could literally do the rest of my career. And I loved it. In fact, I loved every job that I've done. And I would do them all over again. I just loved it. But a financial advisor was phenomenal, and I really liked it. And I was given an opportunity, probably a little bit too soon, to be honest, to go into management. And I really faced a couple of weeks of internal focus and asked myself questions. Do I want to go a path of management and leadership, or stay as an individual contributor and have my life defined for me and my career defined for me? And I decided to go into management. I saw the impact that policies and people and incentive plans and strategy had on my business. And I want to be able to contribute at a higher level. I want to be one of the people that had a voice in creating those and enabling all financial consultants to succeed. And then, as it turned out, it became all the frontline retail employees. So that was the thing that moved me there. And I remember when I was interviewing for a job. Well, that's the second point. Let me back up. The second point that was a fundamental shift for me was I realized I had gone as far as I could go in the financial services division of the bank. The bank was Washington Mutual Bank, and I realized I was on an eighth floor of an elevator lift that goes to 8 floors. I was on the executive committee. I went over to the bank side and I went down two rows lower to get on the bank side because I saw that floor went up to 24. And my point was to get onto an elevator lift that was going to go higher, and even if I went backwards. And it was illogical. And a lot of people scratch their heads like, why would you give up being executive here and then a vice president here? But it changed my life, and it changed my career because I got a chance to attach myself to the growth engine of the organization. And then I came up through the management ranks there. So those two decisions, to go into leadership as opposed to individual contributor, and then jump on the bigger parent company and then sort of surf the wave of growth, were fundamental in identifying what type of leader I wanted to become. And that's what led me to continue to grow with the organization.
Yeah, something that comes to my mind as you're explaining that is, as you were navigating, you were going up the ladder, so to speak, were there certain things that you changed how the organization was run and kind of branded that as your name, that you were behind, that you instituted these new ideas, new ways of managing that had not been done before? Is there any of those kind of things that you could share with us?
Well, we had the most unique incentive plan in the banking organization. It could probably never be replicated again because the times have changed, but it was the most unique incentive plan. And I was one of the people who helped to roll it out. I was a person, and I was actually one of the few people who helped roll it out, who actually was paid under that scheme when I went into the bank side. So I got a chance to see it from that standpoint. When I was sent to California to integrate an acquisition which was same size as Washington Mutual was, I was able to bring that organization to where I thought we needed to go. And I took the best parts of the original Washington Mutual, and I felt like we really created those best parts, but we improved on the things that I thought were barriers to growth. And I think we refined them. Later on, we did 2 more acquisitions. We had 8-fold increase in 30 months. And at that time, after that time, a lot of the function that I was able to do originally on the first acquisition were pulled into the center, and they adopted, excuse me, a lot of the things that we implemented. So to me, the world of incentive was massively important, and that was a way I got to express not only appreciation to the front line, but also empowerment. And so if I was going to say if there was anything that I stood for, it's empowerment of the front line and allowing them to actually manage their business in kind of a P&L fashion, which was unheard of at the time.
Yeah. You also brought up another comment that we often hear about acquisitions. It's often not a pretty word for most people. Most acquisitions fail, as we know, more fail than don't. And it sounds like your acquisitions were very successful. Do you have any secrets you can share with us on how you made those succeed, and what you've seen other acquisitions fail, and what you did differently?
Well, It wasn't me, it was we. So in many ways, I was the spokesperson originally, but the whole organization was behind this. Way early on in Washington Mutual, in my time at Washington Mutual, a group of very smart people decided to create a core set of values, and then the behaviors that supported the values, and then the constituents that those values and what they look like for each constituent that the bank had. So we had that informed our culture, and everything we did fit through those core set of values, and every decision we made fit those values. So my role was to go into kind of the day one of these companies we bought. Remember, the first one was same size as us. The next one was twice as big as our new size, and the third one was bigger than that one. So wow. As we did these acquisitions, I had to go in and talk to 250 executives or senior managers, most of whom we all knew they were not going to stay with the organization. We were not going to keep them. But I had to describe the culture, and I had to give a lot of confidence to what we were going to do, even though, quite frankly, it was quite scary what we were trying to do. And so my role as a communicator was to invite people to join, or invite them and on a values basis. If they find the values didn't fit what they wanted to do, then they were invited to go and leave the organization and have a good career somewhere else. And I used to use the phrase because I had to be confident with these individuals, because they were wondering, who is this Washington Mutual? You're buying the three of the largest thrifts in California, and who are you guys? And so I had to be super confident. So I said, look, join us and be happy. Leave us. If you can't be happy, leave us and be happy somewhere else, and we'll be friends. Just do not stay here and be unhappy. And it was like, these are so embarrassingly simple messages, but it was an invitation to come and join, but we will not corrupt or compromise our core values. And that was an instrumental factor in allowing us to integrate these. And by the way, the people that did like it with us and they did join, they actually helped us make the organization better and better and better. So we're able to recognize the top talent and have them provide much greater contributions. So if I was going to say one thing, it was that, and my role there was communicator and saying, come on board, or please don't, because my point was I recruit really well. So don't worry about me. You can threaten me. If you can buy the values, come on, let's go. But if not, by all means, go somewhere else and we'll stay friends.
Yeah, the word that comes to my mind is respect. You didn't say it, but I can feel that. Any comments on that?
Yeah, that's a good call out. Yes, it's massively important because there's literally animosity in the room. And I used to take a stack of papers, because everybody expects me to go over strategy, growth plans, future earning forecasts, all these things. I'd have a stack of papers as if I was going to do that. And I would put them down on my seat visibly, turn off in those days it was a projector, turn off the projector, and just stand and talk free form for 42 minutes. And always 42 minutes. And then I'd do question and answer for 2 hours. And it was a way to earn respect that I didn't need to rely on props to explain who we are, what we're going to do, what role they were going to play, and what our process was here going forward, and why I was excited for what we could do. That was my 42 minutes. And then answered every question and made certain commitments that we would do in terms of communication, and without never blowing smoke, because that's where you lose respect, is when you say one thing and do something else. So absolutely. That authenticity is overused, but that was a way to try to show you're joining an organization that authentically follows our core values, and we will not deviate from them.
Well said. Well said. Very exciting. So obviously you've done a lot of things in your career, and we'll circle back to those, but you've recently been more of an advisor into that role of a leadership advisor. What inspired you to go into that direction?
Over the course of my executive career, particularly at Barclays, by the time I moved to London, we would have interns, MBA interns from the University of Chicago, Booth School of Business, and we would, all the senior executives, we would get a handful of them to mentor them through the process. And in that, I noticed there's a certain thing that business school students learn. It's a way to communicate, and it's a way of thinking, and it's conventional. And so I love showing them a non-conventional way to look at things, and a different set of questions to ask than what keeps you awake at night and what book are you reading right now. And so I had fun exploring with them. In fact, the biggest thing I noticed was they came in and it was very much sitting back in their chair, and it was very much my career as a cat, it's like a buffet line, and I want to do a little bit of operations. I want to do a little bit. I want to do a little bit, but rarely to say I want to talk to customers. It was always I want a thinking role, and so
Hmm.
we play with that a little bit. And I would say, why don't you go and like actually talk to customers, and you think you'll be much better. And then secondly, why don't we find where you're really good? You're going to have some natural skills, so you're not going to be the CEO because you spent time in 7 different divisions, a year and a half dabbling.
Hmm.
How are we going to build your core expertise? And it was really interesting to watch them change and move from this, I'm here to explore my career, to this saying, can you help me make an impact here? Can you help me navigate so I can have your job one day? Now that's the people I love to work with. So it lit
Hmm.
me up. And then when I left the board work at Santander and Tandem Bank in the UK, I began to develop my mentoring and coaching program. And it's a blast to watch people change. I just did one change with body language, but there's a lot of changes how they think about the world and how they see the world, because most people want to have a bigger impact. And I love helping them to show them how to do that.
Excellent, excellent. So that kind of leads to a good question about inspire, who inspired you, and who do the people that you coach, who do they say inspire them? And how have you seen that play out?
Yes, gosh, there's a lot of people that have inspired me. It's really hard to talk about one. The 3 leaders I mentioned were definitely inspirational, particularly the last 2 were very, very inspirational to me. And I, I, and also I have to go back a little bit because the CEO of Wash Mutual at the time that really helped put us on the map and helped drive the growth, he was, to me, I loved watching him make a presentation. And I always thought, if I was saying that, how would I have done it? I wonder where he got that information. I wonder how he knows how we're going to navigate. And I wonder how he sees the future. And I'd wonder, and then I'd think, okay, I could do this better, but I'd need to skill up on that or upskill on that. And so to me, it was really inspirational because I aspired to be able to communicate like he did. And he brought, I talked about the culture and everything, and ultimately he brought the whole culture in very, very successfully to a certain point in time. And so that to me was massively inspirational. And I didn't model myself after him. I modeled myself in his way of learning and thinking about the world, our place in it, and how we're going to build plans and organize ourselves to make that happen. So that was super inspirational. Regarding, well, and I need to mention one other thing. Jack Welch at GE, I could reach over in the bookshelf and grab it, but I have the copy of the last letter to the shareholders by Jack Welch, and he talked about managing people and managing talent. I won't go into the details of what he said unless you ask me later, but that was a super inspirational thing because it really validated the approach that I've mentioned so far about how to treat people and how to connect with people and how to build your talent base with respect. Now, the people that I coach, it's very interesting because it can be from anywhere. But I've noticed that some of the issue is that there's a lack of inspirational leaders in a lot of people that I coach right now. I think we've become so shareholder driven, and we've
Hmm.
become so conventional thinking in terms of know your numbers and drive your people and hit the plans. And I think that we've kind of taken the soul out of what leadership means. And a lot of the people, quite frankly, that I coach are missing that connection. They're missing somebody in their organization that they can aspire to be like or become. And it's kind of sad. Otherwise, they're reading the same books we all read. They're talking the same authors that we all talk about. So in my mind, that's kind of what's missing. And if I can help them understand how inspiration, the word inspire means to take air into your own lungs. And so how can you begin inspiration and then seek motivation? And that's a little different formula. And that means it doesn't matter if you have an inspirational leader. Let them be motivational, but I inspire myself. And that's what we try to train.
Yeah, I think a few of those points you made were very interesting, especially as far as, you know, finding who you are, not trying to be somebody that you're not.
Yeah.
Very often, when you look at people that you aspire to, you might respect, but then I know in my career in leadership, it's like, I don't want to be like that person. I want to be more of what I need to be, but accomplish it the way I would want to come across and who I naturally am. Otherwise, you come across as fake. How do you teach that in your program?
Man, I love that. I love that. Social media has kind of ruined a lot of words of wisdom because the words of the wisest human beings for all mankind are now spit out there in memes like ketchup on French fries. It really cheapens it. Authenticity is one of those words. It's so overused. I almost shy away from using it. But there's two fundamental things that we try to talk that we talk about accomplishing. And the first is the world around you reflects your projection. So when you look at where you are in an organization, you might want more work-life balance. You might want more impact. You might want more money. You might want a higher status. It doesn't matter. You want more of something. But if you look at where you are, it's a reflection of what you're projecting. So your personal brand is the first thing we talk about. We talk about the understanding of why you project what you project right now, and then how can you change and actually unleash the things, because we limit ourselves in how we see ourselves. And there's a complex process of how our past creates that. Again, I won't go too much detail because of time, but complex process of our past events in our life. And by the way, the ones that we recall that form our opinion of ourselves are the ones with the highest emotional charge. And guess what's the highest emotional charge? Success is one, but higher than that is usually failure, guilt, shame, regret. So we tend to have this sort of a film across what we would naturally project. And we want to, I'm not a therapist, we don't go back and rewrite that, but we want to talk about and be conscious of and have an intentional projection that actually matches who we really are, not who we have thought we are to this point. Well, I hope that's not too esoteric, but the second part, Jim, is that we then take that and say, now, how do I take that and go from execution excellence to strategic impact? And that is a different mindset. It's a whole different way to look at the world. And you need one to get to the other. But once you're projecting something different, your personal brand is much more powerful and it reflects really who you are. Now, how can you become an intentional leader to drive higher impact? And that's to be a strategic contributor. And you need to utilize that personal brand or deploy it now in a way that announces your presence in an entirely different way. So those are two outcomes that we produce. And the results are almost, it doesn't take long. It's almost immediate in how you're seen. And it's fun to watch and it's fun to see people get the more of whatever they wanted. They get that by doing these two things.
And how does that relate then to leaders becoming less micromanagement and more strategic? I think that just building on what you were mentioning.
Perfect. So what that means is that if you've enjoyed this journey, and if you have, and we monitor the steps along the way, we monitor that evolution, then as a leader, it's not your nice to have, it's your actual responsibility to then convey that to your teams and evaluate your teams and their progress, because they're looking for more of something. So it's a responsibility of the leader to deliver that same journey, because why else? Why would you deny that? And it gets into conversations around an employee value proposition, but that's what they must do if they want to be a real leader with real impact, and it lifts the whole organization. If every leader were to do that, it's got massive impact on the organization.
So does that then delve into allowing people to fail?
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Yes, exactly right. You're supposed to, we're supposed to be innovation, and we say innovation is our DNA, but we don't let people fail. So it's not true. It's virtue signaling. And so absolutely, it allows them to fail because they're in a process of discovery. They being your employees, your reports are in a process of discovering, and it takes a few fits and starts. But if you find the right person in the right role and you give them the freedom to explore how they can contribute, you end up with a magical result. But you have to allow them to sometimes come up a little short, try hypotheses and go, or you ruin the confidence. And if you ruin the confidence, pretty soon there's insecurity. When there's insecurity, there's entire companies right now that are operating on survival mode. And you can only do that so long. A players won't stick around.
Yeah.
B players may not, C players do, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. That seems to be the norm, unfortunately. Let's move on into questions. That was fascinating. What do you look for in other leaders that, you hire and as you work?
So here's how I'll answer that question. What comes to mind when you say that is that there's a certain way leaders are told and trained in business school to present themselves. And know your numbers, know your business inside and out. I don't look for that. I'm looking for people that, when I said connect, it's so rare to see somebody really connect with their team. When you're talking to somebody and saying, what do you want to accomplish more of? I want to hear the conversation about the business for certain. And I want to understand the drivers of the business, but I want to understand their strategic approach, their talent management. I want to know, do they have 3 successors on their team? And then I want evidence of how they're connecting with them. To me, that's the part that I really love to focus on. And it's sometimes a little bit rare in certain organizations where you can really find that connection.
Yeah, I like that. The comment that I've often heard is the quickest way to promotion is to find your successor.
It's
Yeah.
counterintuitive, but it's so true. You can't go up if you can't leave your position.
Yeah, if you can't leave. Yeah. So going back to some of the questions is what are some of the secrets of becoming a great leader from your perspective? Any secrets you want to share?
Gosh, I don't want the world to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so first secret is like massively important is when I said earlier, connection of purpose. You see, when a leader says, follow me, and then if I have a problem with your performance, it's fun when I love your performance and I am promoting you. When I have a problem with your performance, our performance management means I am concerned. And that dynamic creates a very interesting relationship. And quite frankly, in my mind, it's a failed leadership style. But when you connect to purpose, now think of vision, mission, and strategy, right? So vision is what we're going to do. Mission is our purpose. Why do we do this? So when we say we're on this mission, we connect everybody. And it's what we did at Barclays with 30,000 people. We refreshed our purpose and this is what we do. This is what we serve. Then I can have a conversation about anything as it pertains to supporting the purpose. And I don't mean it I use virtue signaling, I'll use it again. I don't mean it in a virtue signaling way saying, because we value this, then we're going to make this policy change. No, this is a genuine thing saying, Jim, your job is this. We set your targets for that. And that's to support the overall purpose. So it's really important that you do that. But I notice that you're falling short or the way you're doing it falls short. And so I need you to make changes in order for us to fulfill the purpose. Or I'll, and if it's severe, then I might have to decruit you. So then it's not personal that you're disappointing me. You're not fulfilling your responsibility for the purpose. And it allows for us to make sure that we're getting A players in the organization because of the purpose. So that, to me, that's a big thing. The second thing I'd say, Jim, is that when you come into an organization, we all would do something naturally. We don't even think about what we do. I would just do this, that, this, that. I would, first of all, try to document that so that you be very intentional about that. But secondly, when you go in, I would say, how quickly can you begin to manage 2 down? Now, I don't mean micromanage because I'm against micromanagement, all for empowering, but I believe in management oversight. And I know that the people that work for me are there to tell me largely what I want to hear, how great I am, how important I am, all these things. Now, they'll deny that, but there's a certain level of communication that takes place with direct reports that doesn't always reflect all of the truth because they're showing me what they want me to see and what they don't want me to see, they're keeping from me. So it's just the way things go. So how quickly can you manage 2 down? I want to show you something because it's probably my most prized possession. But one of the things we're able to do at Washington Mutual, because again, I came from the branch ranks, I was able to meet, and as required more and more part of the organization, I was able to meet people 3 and 4 or 5 layers down. And every year we had a all manager meeting. 5,000 managers came into a certain area, and we would have a meeting, and I would always have a big dance for 1,500 people, not in the bank. Everybody had to pay cash, $10. And then first 1,500 people get their $10 to me can come to this dance. HR told me not to do it. The CEO told me not to do it. I said, no, I know where my 1,500 of my people are. They're all with me, so I know nothing's going to happen. And it never did. But my last one, when I announced I was leaving the organization, and I'll just show you this, and it's my most prized position, is that at that last dance, they got together and they gave me this note. Oh, I don't know if you can see it because the background.
I cannot see it. Maybe.
Okay. Trust me. It's okay. What it says is Wash Mutual wishes you well. And 1,500 people wrote me a personal message, not good luck, Carol. Phone numbers, if you want help in England, call me, let me know if Barclays needs help. Mike, it was great. I remember when you were walking down the aisle one time, you stepped on my foot, and it was the funniest way to meet you. And personal messages from 1,500 people. The book is this big, and I could show you page after page after page. Wow. Why do I bring that up? It's because it was a connection with people that were 4 layers below me in the organization. And I loved them, and I love that book, and I can't ever finish it because I cry when I read it. So that's the value of connection, and that's what I would say in terms of tips for leadership. I can't remember the plan that we hit that quarter or randomly picking the year, but I'll tell you what, I remember the relationships with each one of those people. It just makes me cry. So that's a long-winded answer to your simple question, Jim. Sorry about that.
Oh, I love that answer. I mean, it's amazing that you were able to build all those relationships, and obviously you gave them respect, and they gave you respect in spades, and that's a testimony on you and your brilliant leadership. I mean, that's a rare thing to see.
Oh, thank you, But see, Jim, when going day one, you must assume the organization is doing things that gets in the way of the frontline employee. Just assume it.
Yeah.
We don't mean to, but we can't help it. So if we just talk about barriers and which barriers to remove, number one, it's low-hanging fruit. But number two, it cements the connection with the frontline saying, hey, we are here to make sure we're going to give you high expectations. And we only want the best in the world at every position in this organization. But we're going to make the job as easy for you as we possibly can. And if we can't, we'll give you the context for it.
Yeah, you just reminded me of some of the great leaders I've worked for. And the first question out of them would always say, Jim, what barriers can I help you with? And that just kind of reminds me of, setting up employees for success. And you mentioned it earlier when you were doing the acquisitions and mergers, that if you like us, stay with us. If you don't like us, you can leave. But the people who leave, I mean, it's not like you're saying, get out of the way. You're saying, we hope you find what you like. And I think that is not often articulated. I mean, like you mentioned Jack Welch, that was what Welch's philosophy was, is he would lay off the people that weren't performing in a particular role. But there were, a month or two later, after that, there were a bunch of job openings in other parts of the organization where those people were encouraged to apply. And hopefully they were starting to do a role that they enjoyed more than the role that they were doing before. And you can't hide if you could be a great contributor, but if you not doing the job that suits you well, you can't hide it. And sooner or later it'll catch up with you. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, yes. I mean, GE is famous at the time. Now, granted, they've had some problems. There was issues post Jack Welch and all that. And granted that some of the most challenging people I've worked with are ex-GE executives. But the reason is GE had a culture well-defined, a set of values well-defined, and an investment in talent development that was unbelievable. You know that firsthand. So they were intensely interested in giving people opportunities, even if it meant relocations and the like, but opportunities to lead different kinds of businesses, different parts of the business, and really understand the entire global footprint of the organization and impact, which is super rare. But everything lined up with the values, the system supported the philosophies, the whole thing, without naming every component, but it's all aligned to that delivery. What the challenge was, a lot of GE execs would come in to Wash Mutual and say, oh, we had this one value that was really good and the second value that was really good, and we need to do that. And then, we get an executive from Cisco at Washington Mutual. We have this value. We want to change that value. And then an executive from Chase joins us. We love this value. Now, pretty soon we've got, you either have 10 values or you've sacrificed something else, but now it's all of a sudden kind of thrown in the air. So in my mind, GE was best practice at talent management, but it doesn't translate if you can't plug that component into the culture that you're joining. Amazon is not for everybody, but Amazon is what they are. They say what they are. And the people that stay there love it. They love that culture because they know what to expect. They know how things are done. It's a launching pad to a lot of great careers, but that's because they deliver authentically, say, here's who we are, here's how we do it. And it can be harsh, but it's for people that accept that and want that from in their career journey. So that is massively important, I think, in delivering something like Jack Welch was able to do.
All right. So that's awesome. So the next question is the turnaround story about times in your life where you go, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if I can take another step forward, and how you were able to turn that around into something great. Because obviously you've achieved some great things. So you must have had at least one or two pivot points in your life.
I used to have hair, Jim. There's a reason I don't have hair.
Yeah.
There's a couple pivot points. The one that I would talk about right now is we had just started at Barclays. Again, I left Washington Mutual because the value started shifting. Stock was at an all-time high, but that didn't matter. We just simply getting more into subprime lending, and it was something that our division was not doing, and it just didn't match. Personalities didn't match any longer. So I was recruited to Barclays by my former boss at Washington Mutual the previous years. So I went to Barclays, and we just arrived there, and there were some really concerning things around the financial performance. Example, we were 48% to plan for the annual plan. We're 48% to plan when you accumulate all the different various product areas and all the different targets. And so it was like, wow, what's going on here? Well, one night we're in the office working late, trying to figure out how do we kind of address these challenges that we face with the organization. Been a pretty, maybe a half a decade long time of not investing really in the business. So how do we get our arms around this? Well, the phone rings. It's a BBC producer. They say, hi, we're going to put you on national TV on Sunday. We've embedded 3 reporters on your staff, and they've videotaped and audio recorded performance management meetings, training sessions, and customer sales sessions. And you're going to go on a show called Whistleblower, showing how Barclays trains employees to missell to customers. And it was like, oh, wow, that's big. Well, first thing, as an American, I believe it's not legal. So we call the legal department. No, they can do that. They can actually embed reporters on your staff. And so they're going to show the show. So they showed it. In the UK, the banking jobs are union. So you've got that dynamic to deal with. So 30,000 employees, national TV, underperforming organization. And it was a big scandal. The board was upset, obviously. My bosses were upset. The union's upset. The team is embarrassed. And kind of the question is, well, who's the sacrificial lamb? I really thought maybe I was going to get decruited myself, even though we just basically started. So luckily, we were able to convince everybody that the issue was cultural. This is not a behavior issue. It was cultural. In fact, one thing about behavior, there's a hidden camera here with the reporter's bag was put on the table. A young new accounts person talking to a small elderly man who says, I need to borrow some money. I've had my account here since 1932, and I need to borrow some money. And I need about 200, maybe 300 pounds to buy a bed. And the employee goes, oh, wow, that's great. Just like we trained her. Oh, that's great. Goes over and taps her keys on the computer while she's smiling at him. Oh, sorry. This says you can't have a loan. But it does prompt me to suggest that we might want to buy a home contents policy. The guy says, so you won't give me a loan to buy a bed, but you want me to insure my home contents through you. He goes, I'm out. I'm going to transfer banks. And the reporter voiceover says, and if you didn't know how to sell the Barclays way, now you do. So it was, my point being, it's not a behavioral issue, although the behaviors were like, but she was simply doing what she was instructed to do in the way that she was instructed to do it. So we had to change the whole thing. And we had to go on a new journey of saying, let's re-identify our purpose and let's understand where we are now, the burning platform, but let's also create this aspiration of what we want to become and how it will touch the lives of each and every one of the constituents. And we launched a massive overhaul and measured every dimension. So 5 dimensions of the scorecard: customer metrics, employee metrics, management metrics, productivity and efficiency, compliance metrics, regulatory compliance, and then finally financial results. And what we did was, instead of the typical way of reporting, which is financial reports results first, we put that at the end because that's the product of doing the first 4 things right. Example, employee engagement scores were 64% when we first started. Less than 18 months later, 30,000 people, it was 92%. The global high-performing norm was 87. So we became the highest retail bank in the world and the highest retailer in the world at 92%. Now, what does that mean? Sales per seller, we had 10,000 sales, mortgage reps, financial advisors, new accounts, 10,000. We were, for a decade, had been between 9 and 10 sales per seller per week. At the end of this 18-month period, it was actually 16-month period, we were at 23.2 sales per seller.
Wow. Now,
I was promised by all the executives who reported to me that we never could get over 10. It's never been over 10. Nobody on this island has ever done more than 10. You can't ever do 10. It's impossible to do more than 10. We did 23. And then compliance was so much higher that we went from, 7 referred audits, 6 failed audits, to 0 failures, 2 referrals. And the regulator took our customer onboarding process and rolled it out to every other bank. Now, what happened then? We ended up from 48% to plan. We ended up making more money. Can you believe that? We made more money. We actually were 125% to plan, and never again were we below 125% to plan, even when our plan was raised during the middle of the year to pick up for other divisions that were having challenges. So that was, we call it the biggest turnaround in UK banking history, because we basically were not following what everybody in the UK told us we could and couldn't do. We created aspirational goals, and boy, those folks, they stepped right up and they did it. So that was a scary moment in my life, and then turned out to be the greatest gift I ever received.
That's an amazing story. I always, in voice of the customer, and looking at the customer for the customer, you guys really did it. You became that natural choice that everybody aspires to. And any organization I worked with is how do you turn that around? And that's just an incredible story of changing the attitudes of all the employees and empowering them to make that difference for the customer. That's fantastic.
Exactly right. The customer, the C word, right? It's almost pushed aside now when we talk about what people are doing and what their impact is. I think sometimes we can lose focus, especially large organizations, that there's a customer there. And it's like, know your customer, not just their data, know their drivers, and create unique value propositions that solve their problems. It's so obvious, but we kind of lose that a little bit sometimes. Likewise, know your employee. If we're going to spend all that time knowing the customer through our branding efforts, and we communicate our culture through our brand. Well, the same coin says, let's take our brand and communicate to our colleagues, our employees, that culture. So culture and brand are the same coin, 2 different sides. One shines inside, one shines outside. But that's fundamental, even to the point that on the board, I was on one of the banking boards I was on, and we would spend 16 hours over 2 days talking about risks and capital management strategies and regulatory issues and legal contractual issues. And, 15 minutes talking about customer at the end of the meeting. And I was kind of infamous for saying, can we talk about customers now? Can we talk about our service levels? Can we talk about what we're doing culturally to enable our employees to do the business? But the board obviously have to be concerned about a lot of things, but that always kind of amused me that we didn't have time to talk about customers at the board level.
Yeah, I find that interesting. But it also, a couple questions came to my mind when you were explaining that. The CEO or executive levels are often the loneliest jobs in a company, because you're kind of out there. How have you managed that through the years, and to bring about success in the overall team?
Right. So CEOs, if you think about it, they're the most scripted people in the organization. They have big consulting firms there. They have board advisors. They have their executive team. They have their strategy leaders, their PR, and and they lose touch with what their personal brand is. And there's nobody to talk to about some of these things. Now, yes, you can talk about strategic issues, but the pulse of the company issues, they need to understand, not understand, but they need feedback that says, what impact are you having on the organization? And more than that, the stripes on the shoulder, what's the impact that you have and how do your words show up? Because you're now using PR written phrases and things that actually, if you go below the surface, they just make no sense. We stand for this, and yet our numbers are atrocious in that regard. It's very, very lonely because there's nobody to talk to about those things that analyze my impact as a leader. And sometimes that leader you have to be smart and not go against PR and legal, but sometimes you have to go a little bit of heart-led communication that says, wow, this is tough. I'm not sure what we should do, but I am going to think about 3 things that I think we can do. And, maybe you want to get ideas, maybe you don't, but bottom line is that we'll let you guys know, but the communication that comes from the heart is my point, as opposed to a written script that says everything's okay, don't look behind the curtain, everything's okay, don't look behind the curtain. Our top executive, who everybody knew was a jerk, just left the organization, and we say, oh, they left because they're pursuing other opportunities. I'd like to thank them for their contribution. Everybody knows the person got fired. So you don't want to cross a line, but I think there is a way to talk about things, giving people on your team a little bit more credibility and respect in that communication. And that's where the executive coach can come in and say, let's talk about your impact. Let's talk about your personal brand and how can you express it successfully within all these constraints. And so to me, that helps work through the loneliness.
Nice. That's a great answer. So I think we're going to move on to the state of the state, the easy questions about where the economy is going to go. I think everybody knows that the answer to that, right? But obviously we're in some, as you said at the beginning, great expectations, best of times, the worst of times. We seem to be getting more isolated, the US relative to the rest of the world. It seems like everyone's going through that. The remnants of COVID and the financial crisis that created, just to keep everybody alive, so to speak. And just the overall concern about where things are being made and how financials are being managed internationally now. We're more connected. It seems like we were more connected financially maybe in 2019 than we are today around the world. But I don't know. What is your opinion from what you're seeing and how the world has evolved financially and by trade over this let's just say from 2018 on?
It's the most challenging of all times, and this time I think it really is. You've got the global conflicts now and power struggles between nations trying to replace the U.S. as a core currency or as a sole lead economy in the world. So there's that effort. Then there's the actual conflicts that are going on right now that create a lot of uncertainty. There's impact of inflation and then globalization of technology. So you've got these forces that are coming into play right now that drive tremendous challenges, probably more for Europe than anybody. I think the U.S. I think their GDP is targeted to still continue to grow, not at the rate of India and China, but productivity should be the top in the world this year. So I think things are going to be okay for business-friendly environment in the U.S. When I say okay, that's very subjective. I don't know the problems as much as each person listening to this podcast, their problems as much as they do. But in terms of the U.S., I think we're going to see more business-friendly environment, and we're going to not face a lot of the impacts of the tariffs that I think Europe will face. So I think there's some dynamics there. But then also, I was reading a report that said that 74% of CEOs are concerned about the landscape and the policy and the impact it's going to have on their core business model. I'm trying to look at the numbers right now. 40% of them are planning major reorganizations to reflect the changing business model. 82% think that their competitors, the average competitor, is going to cease to exist within 10 years if they don't change their core business model. But when you ask what percentage are pursuing ambitious goals and transformative policies, Just 38% are, because they're going to move to more stable decision making. So loop that back to your question on innovation. If there's ever a time that says in this uncertain times we need to understand innovation and change business models and utilize AI, Gen AI, in entirely new ways, and understand global trade challenges and understand how to manage the negotiation of tariffs. We don't know how it's going to come out yet. It's a negotiation, but how to manage that in a global sense. Ever if there was a time to understand, say, how will we innovate and make sure that we can grow productively and acquire, probably organic growth is going to be challenging. Now's the time. And yet just 38% are planning on doing anything that's even seen as, 38% are focused solely on stability.
Yeah, I think that's what
62% solely on stability and 38% seeking innovation.
Do you ever, from what you see out there, do you believe that the U.S. will increase its capabilities and execution as well as innovation? Or are we going, it is what it is, and we will continue to try to execute offshore?
Yeah, I think that's a big question. That's a big question because it's got a lot of factors that are involved. Why would you say the U.S. has lagged in it? What is the cause of that in execution? If you go to the root of it, as long as the CEOs in the U.S., their primary focus is managing the shareholder relationship, there can't be an answer to that question other than what is happening right now. Now, instead of using China, you're going to see, what kind of a player is India?
Yep.
They can do. There might be a Vietnam. Mexico is another place. There's some possibilities, but the point of it is that there's going to shift. But bring it on shore is extremely challenging, just because of the cost factor and the fact that job 1, 2, and 3 of any CEO is deliver value for the shareholders, and that makes everything we're talking about a real challenge.
Yeah, I think the shareholder is controlling so much. Are the shareholders preventing the U.S. from being visionaries?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is undoubtedly yes. I mean, why do that? I'm pointing at my notes over here, but why do 62% of the CEOs say they're going to favor stability this coming year? Because if they take any chance, if they try to do it, we're going to try this strategy and it fails, there's just no wiggle room, and investors will not tolerate it. So there can be no other answer.
With the deregulation occurring in the banking industry, which in the past has led to recessions, what's different now that's going to happen over these next 4 years, do you think? And how is that going to be managed?
Thanks a lot. My favorite type of question, regulation.
Yeah.
Look, while there may be some changes in terms of how banks are regulated, I think it's in the DNA now. I think they've adapted post-financial crisis to a much more intrusive type of regulator. And so while there may be some easings here or there, capital requirements are not going to change. Nobody wants to go back to, too big to fail again and those issues. They get a little worried about the lending criteria and are we loosening up a little too much again? Are we creating that same type of bubble again? That's always an issue. However, I think that the DNA of the bank is now such that the regulatory aspect of it is front and center. Risk management framework is front and center. And quite frankly, I don't think the next 4 years is going to change that focus.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Mike. Any other closing comments?
No, I think that now is a time that's going to be, as I mentioned before, it's going to be extremely challenging. But the biggest challenges start with the most basic fundamentals. And I think this is a year to really focus on fundamentals and ensure that we understand the purpose of the organization, remind ourselves of that, and communicate, quite frankly, how to connect with somebody is communicating with respect, which means adult to adult communication. And it sounds incredibly basic given all the challenges, but it all starts there. And adult to adult communication, let's get away a little bit from the PR speak, but then connect in authentic ways with the teams. And if you believe talent matters, if you believe that we need to fulfill the future talent requirements from inside the organization, no better time to develop your talent management plan and talent pipeline than right now.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. What a treat it has been for me to pick your brain, so to speak, on so many different topics. You're a fantastic leader, obviously, very successful, and very honored that you joined our program today.
It's been a real pleasure and get to know you as well. Your background is incredibly impressive as well. So compliments can go both ways on this.
Well, thank you very much.